Let me ask you something. Is there a smallest possible object? It's a simple question, I know, but this question leads to a series of questions that makes up something very interesting. So, with every question you have an answer. Whether it's known or unknown, true or false, there will always be one. So the question I asked earlier has an answer as well. And from there, the answer itself can bring forth even more questions. Furthermore, it brings up more and more questions. So, obviously, the first question was, is there a smallest possible object? Now, this question has multiple answers. The first would be to say no. If this is true, that means that everything is infinite. But on the other hand, if the answer is yes, then that brings up the next question. What is this object made out of? If it's made out of something, then obviously it's not the smallest possible thing. But if it's made out of nothing, then I guess we don't exist. This would be because, well, everything is made out of it, and if it's made out of nothing, we surely have a problem. So if this is to be true, then the only way we could exist is through some sort of help. Something from the outside of what we're living in. Now, there is a good amount of people that would want to use this as proof of being in a simulation. If you don't know, there is something called the simulation theory. This states that we are just running as just some computer simulation on someone's computer somewhere. You see, if everything was made out of nothing, it would mean that the world is just an illusion of some sort. It would mean that we just have consciousness of everything around us while not really making our own decisions. Now, I don't believe this theory, but it's definitely interesting. I'll say that much. But let's go back to the original question. Is there a smallest possible object? The opposing answer would be to say no. There isn't one. With this mindset, we can safely say that everything is infinitely small. And when you think about the two opposing answers, this is the one I would like to say is true. Personally, I don't like the idea of everything just being a simulation. It just doesn't seem right to me. So, that's the answer, right? Everything is infinite? It really just comes down to a question. Is the universe infinitely small? Or just an illusion? I would love to think it's that simple. In fact, when I first came up with this idea in the first place, I thought it was that simple. I had even made most of the video when I realized how there was more to it. So what is it that I'm talking about? How could there possibly be more to it than just that? Well, it's the consequences of an infinite universe that is complicated. You see, no matter which answer is correct, it comes out to everything just being nothing again. Or an illusion, if you prefer that. I think the hardest part of all this is simply explaining it. But I'll try. So, why would an infinitely small universe be the same as nothing? Well, look at it this way. If you took the space out of an object, it would be the same as if it became nothing. As you may or may not know, density is measured by how much stuff is fit into a space. For example, if I had a box that was full of stuff, it would be way more dense than a box with nothing in it. This concept goes down to the micro level. The less space in between atoms, the denser an object would be. So, let's say we took out all the space in this object. Doing this would shrink it, because there is less space in it now. Now, let's do the same to the atoms. After all, they are made out of something as well. Remember, we are going off the idea that everything is infinitely small. So now we have shrunk the atoms down. So now there is more space in between the atoms again. So, let's just get rid of that space. Now, because of that, we made the same object even smaller. Now, since everything is made out of something, we can take the space out from in between the things that make up the things that make up the atoms. And from here, I think you can tell what's going to happen. The object can just keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller for a literal infinite amount of time. So, at what point does the object become nothing? Well, it won't exactly. But this also means it can't quite exist either. You see, if at any point it can get smaller, there is nothing that is actually making up everything in the universe. If there is the smallest possible object, then that would be the foundation of the universe. Everything that exists would be made out of that object. But if there is no smallest possible object, that means there would never be an underlying thing that makes up everything. Now, we will never be able to actually take out the space in between the atoms, and all the things smaller than it. But that's not the issue. It's the space itself that's the issue. If you cut nothing into 3 pieces and spread it out a bit, it's still nothing. It doesn't matter that there is space in between the atoms and all that makes up that as well, because it's essentially just spreading out the space. I think the biggest issue here is just not being able to comprehend an infinitely small world. If everything is infinitely small, that also means that it would be infinitely big as well. There could be no real scale of everything. We are always comparing things to each other. An infinite universe would break the scale and just say that everything can be nothing, everything, and something all at the same time. After all this, it would almost be easier to just say that there is the smallest possible object. That way we could at least comprehend it. Whichever answer you choose, it makes everything look quite impossible without some sort of help. How could the world be naturally infinite? It doesn't make sense. As I explained, everything would technically be nothing if it were infinite. And the same goes for if there would be a smallest object. It just couldn't be like that naturally. Now, I know this is kind of getting into the religious side of things, but there is actually no possible natural way that without some sort of help could exist. Whether that would be a person running a simulation or an all-knowing God, it just has to be. I understand that there will be quite a few people that wouldn't like this conclusion, but it's the only one that truly makes sense. Now, when it comes to what kind of higher power you believe in, that's up to you. I simply want to state that there can't possibly be a natural world without one. We just wouldn't exist. I'm not saying this to be controversial or anything like that. It's just the only conclusion that makes sense. Believe what you will, but I think I've made a pretty good scientific explanation of how the world could not exist without a higher power. Now, maybe there is something I'm missing. Maybe there is some sort of underlying answer that I'm just not seeing. And maybe one of you have that answer. But I'm going to stick by what I've said. In the end, it shows that something so insignificant like a simple question can spark a whole string of discoveries and things to talk about. So, is there a smallest possible object? I can't tell you. We simply don't know. It doesn't matter whether the universe is infinite or finite, because either way, it means the same thing for us.